that was a real insight actually into how to really support families. And as I said, a crash course. I was on call as the media person when Madeline McCann went missing, and worked with the McCanns for a few years on that. I think that what the charity sector gives people is the power to change something. And I loved that idea. I loved that suddenly overnight our ability to fundraise had evaporated. We were no longer able to run events. We were no longer able to help people like you that walk and trek and run and jump out of aeroplanes for us and do all that stuff. It just evaporated. It was scary a lot of the time, thinking, how is this going to work? And waking up thinking, God, I hope this works, or how long is this going to last? How long can we last doing this? It's creating a culture that we are all in it together. Like, there is no one of us that is more important or more expert or has a bigger say. We are all in it as one team, a group of experts desperately trying to improve the lives of children and young people and their families across Sussex. And the special thing about Rockinghorse is we're also there when it gets really serious and really specialist. It's the children with cancer and the babies who can't breathe. It's the teenagers who are experiencing really poor mental health and suicide and eating disorders. We do all of that stuff. That's what makes it special. I think that's what keeps me happy is there's a bigger job to be done, and I've got a little part to play, and I'll play my part until the big job gets done.
Good to go.
Magic. Well done there.
Here we are.
We're here.
Here we are. Episode 24 of 24.
You made it.
We're here. I'm delighted to be welcomed with CEO of Rockinghorse Children's Charity.
Woo!
Donna Holland. Donna, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Your voice is even more croaky than it was last night. You are clinging on there. Thank you, Sam. Just a massive, massive thank you. What an incredible 24 hours later.
It's been of many things I've done, this has been probably one of the most magical. It's been brilliant. Like, every guest has just been great. Just hearing so many fascinating stories, and people have jumped online from other countries and all sorts, and it's just it really has been fascinating. People that come in last night and supported, and it was lovely to have Kelly and my mum and dad and the kids as well. And it's been a magical day, magical 24 hours.
I was going to say day, night, back into day.
Whatever it is, but it's been brilliant, and looking forward to this one.
Here we go.
Let's do it. Let's jump in. So straight away, just tell the listeners a little bit about your story and your career.
Yeah, so Donna Holland, Rockinghorse CEO. I have worked in the charity sector for more than 20 years now, which feels kind of scary, and a long time. I've worked in national charities, international charities, local charities, big charities, small charities. They've always been children's charities or young people's charities, but quite often from different lenses. So looking at different aspects of what children and young people are facing. I started out in a really small local charity. It was called the Orpheus Centre. It was run by a guy called Richard Stilgo, which my parents and people kind of around that age will remember him being on the telly quite a lot. He did lots of stuff with Andrew Lloyd Webber and was involved in Starlight Express, which as a kid was, the musical of my dreams. I love roller skating, and I still roller skate. I play for a local team, Brighton Rockers. We play roller derby. We play all over the world. And so roller derby and skating has been a big part of my life. So
wow.
Starlight Express was, the musical. So I started out working for his charity. It was a centre for young disabled people, using the skills that they might need to stand on stage and sing and perform to help them with their confidence, to deliver their care and how to direct people to feed you or clothe you or what you want to do, and the parallels between those. So I started there and did 5 years doing marketing and all sorts of different stuff. And And then I went and lived in Estonia for a couple of years, doing some volunteer work. I taught English as a kind of way of getting by, and then worked at lots of different volunteer projects. And I'd never done a gap year, so I kind of wanted to go and do something kind of hands-on. So I volunteered and worked in orphanages, worked with trafficked women, worked in old people's homes, just anything I could possibly do to find lots of different organisations. So did that for a while, and then I came back to the UK and I went to work for a charity called Missing People, which at the time was called National Missing Persons Helpline. And I worked with them through their rebranding process and worked with some really awesome people. That was a real kind of crash course in communications, but also service delivery and how to deliver really compassionate services. Because actually the thing about what the charity delivered as Missing People wasn't necessarily about finding the people that were missing. That was kind of the police's job. And whilst the charity would support and use its platforms and its ability to generate media to help, actually it was about supporting the people that were left behind when a child went missing or when a family member went missing. So that was a real insight actually into how to really support families. And as I said, a crash course. I was on call as the media person when Madeline McCann went missing, and worked with the McCanns for a few years on that, as well as not long after that actually Shannon Matthews was another quite high profile case, worked on those. So I was there for a few years, and then I went off to girl guiding, went to work with girls and young women, and again another rebranding process really, and supporting them through. They were on a real journey to become a much more inclusive organisation. They were kind of historically quite white, middle class and Christian, and they had this kind of image problem actually, because what they were doing wasn't really reflective of that. So supporting them and working on projects that helped them open up to new audiences, worked on their trans inclusivity stuff, redeveloping their programme to make it more modern and relevant. Did lots and lots of different stuff. It was a real kind of crash course in just how much a charity can achieve. And while I was there, that was some of the most interesting experiences, but also some of those kind of light bulb moments. And particularly around we had to raise £2 million to redevelop the programme. So if you know much about guiding and scouting, it's all about badge collection and that kind of stuff.
I was a cub.
Were you?
Yeah,
okay. Back in the day. So I was a brownie, and I got my I remember even at the time brownies are 6 to 10 years old, and I got my hostess badge. I don't know whether there's an equivalent in the Cubs, but probably not. But it's you basically make a cup of tea and serve it to somebody. And I remember at the time thinking, I know how to make a cup of tea. Why do I need to learn how to make a cup, serve it? It wasn't like, let's all make a cup of tea and it was a nice community thing. Anyway, this kind of stuck in my mind. And when I was at Girl Guiding, we started doing this program called the Girls' Attitude Survey, which was like a piece of research that looked at the temperature. It was like a temperature check for what girls and young women were experiencing. And actually what we started then doing was using that as a platform to campaign for lots and lots of different issues that were affecting girls and young women. So that's where the work that we did around getting rid of page 3 out of the Sun, which again was one of those things that as a kid you grew up just thinking it was normal that there were teenage girls half dressed in a public news, very big publication. And the girls and young women through the Girls' Attitude Survey said, this is outrageous and this is affecting us. Boys, bring it into school and show us it and use it as a weapon against us. But there were lots of other campaigns that came out of all of that stuff. And one of the kind of highlights, or certainly I thought at the time, one of the highlights of my career was probably late 20s maybe. The Girls' Attitude Survey got taken to number 10. And so I went along as the representative from Girl Guiding to talk about the Girls' Attitude Survey. And actually, I think it was about the effect of the media and images and how that was affecting girls and young women's self-esteem and the impact of the kind of patriarchal impact of that on girls and young women's self-esteem. So I went along to number 10 and literally thought that was the best day ever. This was, I'd made it, took a photo of myself outside number 10, messaged my mum. I was so excited, and what a great experience. And really thanks to the leadership at Girl Guiding for sending me as a reasonably young person to go and do that. And I walked into the room, and it was being chaired by this guy who was much older than me at the time. And he was dressed in a kind of military outfit. I have no idea which type of military. I'm not really down with that, but I knew I recognised it as okay, you're in the military. And as soon as I walked in, he said, "Oh, good, the tea girl's here." And all of that excitement and all of that confidence and best day ever stuff just evaporated immediately. And I think, again, from the generation that I am, my first instinct was, don't embarrass him. Don't say anything that might make him feel uncomfortable. Show him up. Don't challenge. Just try and soften the situation. Yeah. And in the same way that you had, when people bib their horns at you when you're 14, don't make it worse. Just ignore it. So kind of got myself together and said, oh no, actually I'm here to talk about the impact of the patriarchy on girls and young women's self-esteem, and sat down, and the women around the room kind of nodded at me and did that kind of shared thing of like, yeah, we know that was a horrible experience, and I got back to the office thinking, yeah, the hostess badge and the tea badge absolutely shouldn't be something that we're doing. So I was really proud to be part of that journey. And I was in the fundraising team. My job was to raise that money, and we did. And then some other brilliant colleagues who worked in the programme team just completely redeveloped the entire programme. And it now does amazing. I mean, it did amazing things before, but it's really focused on giving girls and young women the skills and experiences they need, as well as collecting the badges and doing all the stuff that Girl Guiding does. So yeah, I was there for a while. After that, I went off to work at a youth mental health charity, a digital mental health charity. Pre-COVID, we delivered all of our services through a phone, actually, and it came from the idea, really the kind of background stuff of that was that even at that time, this was 10 years ago, young people didn't really expect to ever have to walk into a bank to do their banking. It didn't, online banking was a thing, and they'd never had to walk into a bank. It just seemed like, why would you ever need to do that? And yet for young people walking into a mental health service, you'd have to walk into a physical building. And usually that building was in your town, in your nearby city maybe, and it had youth mental health service kind of branding and banners, and it was very much like a difficult and a barrier to stop young people accessing services. So this charity digitized that entire service and put it online and worked with the NHS and delivered those kind of mental health counselling via web chat, the phone, and Skype. Actually, it was before the Zoom days, but it was all of that kind of stuff. And so they support, at the time they were supporting around 3 million young people every year with pretty much anything that a young person contacted them about, from suicide to homelessness to mental health stuff to benefits, housing, whatever they wanted to talk about, sexual health. So I worked there for a while, and then I was living in Brighton already by then, but commuting up to London, and I thought, I need to live and work in the same place. It was actually during the time when there were lots and lots of strikes, and it was just, going up to London was an absolute nightmare. It got to the point
5 days a week. Yeah,
5 days a week. So it was pre kind of working from home being normal. I did work from home occasionally, and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I'm constantly either late for a meeting going into town or late for my life when I'm back in town. I could never, my friends would say, oh, do you want to come to this theatre gig? And I'd say, I can't, don't buy me a ticket because I don't know if I can get home by 7:30. So I was really lucky, found an interim post at a charity called Maternity Worldwide, who do amazing work in sub-Saharan Africa with girls and young women. So a lot of girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa die in childbirth. And they die in childbirth for 3 reasons, really. One is that there are no hospitals, there's no midwifery, there's no neonatal services. So there's nowhere for them to go, even if there was the ability to get there. The second one is then the ability to get there. So the roads might be dangerous, or there might not be transport, or it's just too far to go. And then the third one is around actually their economic value in society is that sometimes they die because it's not worth keeping them alive. It's too expensive to access that treatment. And so the charity kind of looked at each of those three prongs and delivered services, either setting up maternity centres or providing bikes and transport that villages could access and use to get women and children to hospital, or economic empowerment programmes that enabled women to have value in their communities that meant they were more likely to be invested in if they came into harm whilst they were trying to give birth. So it was a fascinating charity and a local one. It's based in Brighton and works in sub-Saharan Africa. So so a couple more local charities, and then, as you know, turned up at Rockinghorse. So
and here we are.
And here we are. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just listening to that and listening to your journey and that career, like, you left the university and went straight into that charity. Where did that? Was that always your ambition? Where does that where does that passion come from for the sector? Like, to always want to work in that.
Yeah, so it came from, actually, as most things do, just chance, really. I was doing a marketing degree at university, and I had to find an industrial placement or go on an industrial placement as part of your degree between years 2 and 3. And I went off to the careers fair place that they have for the university and walked around, and it's lots of companies trying to encourage you to apply to their industrial placement program and then onto their grad scheme. And as I was walking around, it was all huge companies, kind of Shell and ExxonMobil, BP, and lots of these companies. I thought, I don't want to work there for a year, let alone join their grad program. And none of these things felt like they were going to be doing really good stuff in the world. And at that point, it wasn't about the charity. I just thought, that's not for me. That's not what I'd done, what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I'd chosen marketing because it's a kind of combination of art and science. And I liked both, but was never going to be an artist or a scientist. But a little bit of both is kind of the right balance and about my level. And I really enjoyed doing marketing. And sadly, and I hope it's different now, we never did charity marketing as part of our degree. That didn't seem to be on the radar. So I went home a bit sad and think, what am I going to do as my industrial placement? Maybe I shouldn't do an industrial placement and I'll just go straight into year 3. And I was sat at home with my mum looking through the local paper, because this was the 90s and that's how people found jobs in those days. Yeah, exactly. Looking through the classifieds in the back of the newspaper, just trying to think, what do I want to do as a job? And there was a little advert for the Orpheus Centre, and it said they wanted a marketing officer or a coordinator kind of level post. And they wanted a website. This was back in the day, not everyone had a website. And they were interested in how they would reach more young people. And my mum said, well, maybe you could do that. And I thought, that's a real job. So contacted them and said, look, I'm a marketing student, the stuff that's in the advert I think I could do. Could I come and chat to you? So I did. I went and chatted to Megan, who was the CEO there, incredible woman, and someone I still think, what would Megan do? Had a chat with her and said, look, I've never built a website before, but I'm pretty sure I can. We didn't call it social media back in that day, but it was just using online resources to reach young people. I've got a MySpace page, as everybody has. I can set you up a MySpace page, which is about the extent of social media then. Good old MySpace. So I was a young person, so of course I had a MySpace page. And she said, yeah, let's give it a go. Come and do a year. We'll do it as your industrial placement. It had to be a paid industrial placement. We'll have you as an industrial placement. So I started there. I built them a website. I literally bought do you remember the Dummies Guide 2s? They might still exist, those yellow and red, not yellow and red, yellow and black books. I bought one of those, was very open and just sat on my desk and used, Microsoft Front Page, which was the Office, I don't even know if that exists anymore, the Office platform for building websites. Sat on Microsoft front page and just built them a website with a nice hit counter, because that was a thing back in those days.
Nice.
Did that, set them up a MySpace page, and then just got involved in everything that they did, and thought, this is what I want to do. This is how I use all that marketing, that art, that sciencey stuff for good. And it was, I stayed there for a year, went back to university. They offered me a full-time job whilst I was doing my placement. So I had a sabbatical almost from it to go and finish my degree, and then came back straight afterwards, and then stayed there for another 5 years. And as I've talked about, never looked back, never thought there's nothing else I want to do in the world other than do this.
But you get into university then and studying, or just from that, you obviously, your core values of you was conscious then that you wanted to do something purposeful. That's what I find fascinating at that young age, just going, whatever I do, whatever role I'm going to go into, it's got to have purpose, and not and being that self-aware at that young age, because 43 and still wondering what I'm going to do.
Me too.
Still juggling.
Still waiting to grow up.
Yeah, still. But it strikes me, like, just listening to you talking about, because you could have easily gone for some of those bigger jobs, but from how you've described it, is that they didn't align with what your values.
No, not at all.
But you was, at that young age, you were sure of what your values were as an individual.
Yeah, and I think also,
I don't think I was. I look back at 25. I think I would have. I didn't have a clue, really. I still don't know. But I guess from knowing that you've got the values that you have instilled in you, that you go, I'm going to follow that path because that's purposeful, and that's going to align with me doing a career for the rest of my life. It's got to align with who I am as a person.
I think for me at the time, it was more about, there was a little bit of me of seeing my dad worked at the same organisation that he did from 16 till the day he retired, and so in my head you did things for life, so thinking like, well, I don't want to do that for life, but then also thinking, I think that what the charity sector gives people is the power to change something. And I loved that idea. I loved that. If I'd gone and worked for some of those grad programs, I was thinking, what am I going to change? I knew at that point I had the kind of right, well, probably not particularly good at when you're a teenager, it's all a bit angsty, but I had that, something has to change. The world has to change. There are people out there that are not having the same opportunities. And, from a very kind of teenage perspective of it, the world felt a bit unfair for some people. And so for me, the charity sector was a way of having power to change. It gave you agency. You could actually try and work on something that would change something, rather than, it wasn't necessarily that those companies were doing bad things in the world, but they just weren't changing the world.
They weren't having an impact.
Exactly.
Like nowadays, like you sort of, I guess we talk about companies that are, sustainable and we talk about that, a lot, that we're going to work with that company. Are they in line with our values? Are they sustainable? Are they exactly. Are they having the right impact today? That's, people are looking at that now so much more, aren't they? I think.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that has changed in that kind of 20 years. Actually, if you went to that grad program, you might actually, if you were inspired to make a change and be the change, that some of those opportunities might actually give you a chance to do that now. But certainly, when I was there, as my my teenage self was not thinking that was possible. So,
we're going through the different roles in the charity. Obviously, talk to me about, because before obviously coming to Rockinghorse, she was deputy CEO and Concordia, that was right, wasn't it? So talk to me about them running that charity during the pandemic.
Gosh, I mean, I think my experience, and certainly talking to other charities, other CEOs, other leaders in the charity sector, it was really similar for a lot of us. There was these two contrasting things we had to deal with. One was suddenly, overnight, our ability to fundraise had evaporated. We were no longer able to run events. We were no longer able to help people like you that walk and trek and run and jump out of aeroplanes for us and do all that stuff. It just evaporated. And so there was lots of kind of cancellations and rescheduling and pushing back. So there was this kind of concern of, gosh, where are we going to get the money from to do the things that we know we need to do? And actually, I think that whole process has changed the way the charity sector and other people outside the charity sector see our reserves. Actually, of so many charities during that period had to lean back into their reserves, and historically, you might have kind of 3 months, 6 months of reserves, and lots of us had to use reserves for a year, 18 months. And it's really enabled a discussion to happen about why charities need to hold that money just in case something like this happened. And it had been such a long time since charities needed to do that there was starting to be a discussion around, well, why do you need reserves at all? Yeah. So there was that. There was, okay, what have we got in reserves and how long can we function before we need to start worrying about where the money's coming from? And on the flip side of worrying about where the money was going to come from and how you were going to fund the services, there was a skyrocketing of the need for the services that you're delivering. And again, this is universally an experience of many, many charities across the sector. That at the time, I was working for a charity that ran emotional wellbeing programs in schools, so supporting young people who weren't dealing well with their emotions, and that was impacting their behaviour and their ability to socialise and their academic achievement. And suddenly we were seeing the need for that skyrocketing because young people were really struggling going into lockdown and having to do online schooling, but also we couldn't get into schools. So a really quick, and again, not alone in this, so many charities had to go through this very, very quick digitization process of just suddenly, okay, how do we make our services online? How do we deliver that online? And I was working with two incredible women at Concordia, Stephanie, who was the CEO, who just gave us the green light to try, fail, just get on with it, give it a go. And Fiona, who was running the program. And they were amazing. And luckily, having come from a digital youth mental health charity, I could pull in quite a lot of the stuff that we'd already been doing. So it was scary a lot of the time, thinking, how is this going to work? And waking up thinking, God, I hope this works. Or how long is this going to last? How long can we last doing this? Tiring. There's lots and lots of long days. And again, I don't think that's even universal to the charity sector. So many of us suddenly went from working 9 to 5-ish to a lot longer hours. Sure. And being at home just any day or night trying to get stuff done. But also really inspiring. I mean, we managed to do that. We digitized that process. We supported more young people through that process, and we learned loads of stuff. When you come out the other side, and I hope we're out the other side as much as is possible, you look back on any of those experiences in the same way I look back at my time at Missing People, running a press team with national stories, or working at Girl Guiding while the Daily Mail are being very angry about all the stuff that we're doing. At the time it feels awful and scary and terrifying, and you feel too small for the task at hand. When you look back, you think, my God, what have we learned? It's
we did. I think so many people come out of COVID, didn't they? And you look back and go, how many companies pivoted and had to, and obviously some couldn't, and they failed. But I guess from any business model, and we're going to this in a bit, I suppose, but any business model, charity is still a business fundamentally. You've still got to generate. It's P&L, we've still got to generate money, and what that looks like in obviously various different ways. But ultimately, how companies looked at different aspects of what they're doing, especially from a digital point of view, that you're able to go, like Brad, for example, at Network My Club, we're going to go on Remo. He talks about how Remo saved his business and stuff. And I thought that, for me, that was such a massive inspiration. Like, I see so many businesses go, we've got Kathy Catton, like Brian Ching, I love her. She's brilliant. And
Yeah.
again, pivoted loads of stuff and done some amazing things. And there's so many. Like for me, like we're all people. I ask obviously who inspires you and blah blah blah, and I ask my quick fire questions on every episode. But for me, I'm surrounded by people that inspire me, like within our business community, and listen to stories like that, even about the charities or sector and stuff. These small charities are just able to go, right, we've got to adapt, and and just that survival mode kicks in, and it's incredible,
does.
really. And you're right, actually, to look back on them times, actually, at the time, thinking this is the worst thing, like we can't, how are we ever going to get through it? And here we are, through it, and thriving and doing.
Yeah.
Turning a corner, hopefully.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope we are. Yeah.
Talk to me a bit, as we alluded to there, business and charity, they are still similar to, and again, I talk about culture, as I do on every episode. Talk to me about the culture of Rockinghorse, like since you've come on board, and have you got a vision for really what that looks like to you, and how you want it to be within the team now?
Yeah, so we're a small charity, probably just under £1 million. There's 8, nearly 9 of us. Quite a lot of part-time people, so a really small group of people. What we've built is a group of experts. Actually, every person in my team is an expert in what they do. They are the most knowledgeable and the most experienced, and it's their area of work. And my job really is to join the dots between what they're doing and try and point everybody in the direction that the trustees and myself have worked on with our strategy. But I'm incredibly lucky to work with people that are those experts. And we were talking about this last night, actually, with Rachel on her one around how you scale from 10 to, I don't know, how many hundreds of people. I can't see Rockinghorse needing to ever scale to that. We are in Sussex. We there's so much more to do, but we don't need to grow for growth's sake. We don't need to be a huge charity. What we do is very local and very specific. So it is about that building that team, and I think for me it's creating a culture that we are all in it together. Like there is no one of us that is more important or more expert or has a bigger say. We are all in it as one team, a group of experts desperately trying to improve the lives of children and young people and their families across Sussex, and to do that in a way that is absolutely kind not only to each other, in that we respect each other's experience and expertise, but we're also really kind to ourselves while we're doing it. Because actually working for a charity is really tough, and it's tough for different members of the team in different ways. So for example, for our fundraisers, it's really hard being a fundraiser. You are constantly asking people for help, and we all know how hard it is to ask for help. But if you are asking for help, which is basically what we do on a daily basis, we're asking people, will you give us your time? Will you give us your money? Will you give us your experience? Please, can we have? If you're doing that day in, day out, and being told no a lot of the time, that's really hard. You've got to pick yourself up each time. And when you're very passionate about what you're asking for help for, it's really tough to keep doing that. And the fundraisers do that every single day on a daily basis, constantly asking.
Because I guess it's like that sense of almost like rejection that you're going to inevitably maybe get. From people. Not inevitably, that's a bit hard, because I know there's lots of people that do support, but it is, you've got to knock on a lot of doors, like a salesperson.
Yeah, exactly that. It's the same skills and experience and resilience that you need in sales. And this is, where marketing and sales, and it's all, whether it's a company or a charity, you've got to keep going in the face of no, or maybe later, or being ignored, or whatever it is, you've got to keep going. And so the fundraisers have a really tough job of that, and we need to be kind to them. They might be having a good day or a bad day. They might have been told no just one too many times that day, but really then kind to themselves as well, of like, it's okay if you don't have a good day. That's totally fine. But
because I guess and difference between, because if you're selling something to someone, trying to sell a product, a service, whatever it is, whereas fundraising, that you're selling something to someone, there's a benefit to them because it's the product you're going to buy, you're going to purchase this, you're getting me your money for it. When you're fundraising, you're just actually asking them to just give you money.
And sometimes it's
time or whatever it looks like.
Sometimes you're asking for a specific thing. Please, can you give me some money so I can pay for this amazing research that will make X, Y, and Z young people have a better experience, or buy this piece of kit. Sometimes it's asking, can you just support the charity and trust that we will spend this money in the best possible way? And that's tough. So it's helping each other, and every role in the organisation has a different kind of toughness. Whether if you're a project manager and you're delivering projects, you're working in the NHS and working with doctors and nurses, you're working in this huge organisation where things are slow and takes time, and you have to find the right person, and it's a kind of a constant battle is the wrong word, but it's a constant challenge to keep going and keep making sure that you are getting the best projects and the best bits of equipment into a hospital. So I think everybody in the team is an expert. Everybody has this really tough aspect of their job. And for me, it's really making sure that everybody is in it together. We are all in it together. Actually, ultimately, my job is, if it goes wrong, I'll worry about that. Their job is to do the good stuff and celebrate the successes, and equally celebrate the successes. This isn't about me. This is about the team. We are one.
I love that. And how does that, like, you've worked in a number of different charities, how does then the culture that Rockinghorse compared to one of maybe the bigger charities that you've worked at? Is there a difference that you've seen, or do you feel the skills from that large organisation into Rockinghorse?
I would hope I've brought all the elements of best practice that I've seen and none of the bad stuff. But you never know, right? Ask the team. Every single charity I've worked for has a different culture. And whether you are a junior member of staff starting out, or a middle manager, or leading it, you then have a different level of agency and ability to affect that culture. They are all so different. I think it's exactly the same as different companies. And, we work with so many amazing companies who are the wonderful people that say yes to us. And you can tell when you walk into an organisation what it's like, and from how people interact with you and who you get to talk to and who interacts with you. So, there's no...
It's amazing. I know we've sort of spoke about it before as well, about like I guess the perception of Rockinghorse as being bigger than 9 members of staff. And like you said, many of them part-time, and I think it's great that every time you talk, and you talk so brilliantly about Rockinghorse and deliver the message of what it's about and how you do it, but actually alluding to the fact that we are a small team and letting people know that. And I do think that's an important.
We are in comparison, we are a very small organisation. We are a brilliant team of incredible humans doing really amazing work, but we are tiny. And certainly I think the comparison to some of the larger charities in Sussex, I always think, gosh, I would love a marketing team that size and a fundraising team that size and a finance team that size. It's that we've got one person, and we are lucky to have one person in each of those roles who are amazing. There's only one of them. So.
Of course. Yes, I mean, for me, just before we move on to the last sort of couple of questions, as I alluded to last night, I think timing wise, obviously I didn't want Luca to break his arm, but timing wise, from a motivation point, I looked at, we was in the hospital on Saturday, and he was lying in bed, he was sleeping pain. Kelly was on the bed next to him, and they let us both stay in, which was really kind, which I don't generally, because it was late, and I was sitting on the thing, and I was awake and looking around, and I saw all these Rockinghorse stickers on the equipment, and honestly, it killed me. I just looked around and just felt like I'm doing this thing, and you said to me about, I guess people, I think I put a post out and said about what's my why, and why do I raise money for Rockinghorse? What I do, and not only did it saved my son's life when he was young, but to actually then fix him again, so close to this event. And you talk about it really well. Anytime you do events, that we're there for the scrapes and the
bumps and breaks and cuts and scrapes. Yeah. No. Bumps and breaks and cuts and scrapes. It came from somewhere over the last year or so that I've been talking about it, and I just thought it's so true. Rockinghorse is there for all of that stuff. All that, I remember my parents live near East Grinstead. I was forever at the children's ward, the peanut ward up in East Grinstead, getting your chin, or my brother used to get his chin done quite a lot when he'd fall out of a tree, or I'd cut my arm, and usually knees, get your knees sorted out. But we're there for all of that kind of stuff that just happens. It is life, it happens, kids fall and break and bump, and they get hurt. But we're also there, and the special thing about Rockinghorse is we're also there when it gets really serious and really specialist. It's the children with cancer and the babies who can't breathe. It's the teenagers who are experiencing really poor mental health and suicide and eating disorders. We do all of that stuff. That's what makes it special.
It really is the most special planet. I don't need to go on about my love for it and why it's so amazing, and it is. It truly is, and like you said, it's such an amazing. We've got an amazing team at Rockinghorse, and every single one of them, all the fun day, every single event, always with a smile on their face, and always doing such a and that is credit to you with that culture and that you created, and it's amazing. So, I mean, look, talk to me about what's the future for Donna Holland.
Wow, the future for me is the future for Rockinghorse. For now, I'm going to be around to for a while, hopefully. I think for the charity, it's, as I said, it's not growth for growth's sake, but I want to be able to do more. I want to work more closely. We've got this amazing champions program that we set up in the last year that one of the team runs and has done an amazing job. We've now got 36 doctors and nurses and other medical staff that work all over Sussex in all of the children's wards and baby units, and they're the ones who tell us what young people are experiencing, what projects they need, what equipment and stuff they might need us to buy. So doing more of that, and certainly doing that quicker, being able to respond to the needs and the issues that young people are experiencing, speeding that process up as much as I possibly can. And we've done huge amounts of work in the last year to really speed that process up. But I think there's lots more we can do. Just being there for more children and more families at that moment, as you've experienced recently, when they need us the most. That's the kind of, what's in it for me. I think one of the things I'm really interested in, kind of personally and professionally, is the role of the charity sector in paediatric medicine. I think there's so many amazing there's dedicated children's hospitals all over the country, and most of them have a Rockinghorse attached to them, and how we can share information amongst those charities and understand what works and maybe what doesn't, and do more of the stuff that works and less of the stuff that doesn't, and how do we understand what works and what doesn't, and then make sure we're getting the money to those really dial changing projects. And Rockinghorse does some of that stuff. We fund a youth worker who supports young people going into A&E with mental health stuff. We fund research that means that there's now the world's first clinic up at Sussex looking at personalised medication for kids. We do that dial changing stuff. What I want to do is more of that stuff, alongside all the really nice stuff that we do around environments and toys, which all is lovely, but it also has medical purpose. It's all supporting the doctors and nurses. It's pain distraction toys. It's stuff to do while you're having chemo. It's environments that enable doctors and nurses to quickly diagnose kids. By looking at the ceiling, you can check whether a child can move their neck and diagnose what a child might be experiencing. So it's doing more of that stuff.
I love it. Listen, thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome.
Guest for 24 hours. We are going to, as I've done with every guest, finish with our quick fire questions.
Okay.
So, what one piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
It's really trivial, I'm afraid. It's not one of those light bulb moments. So we're reasonably similar age. When I was 18 going into 19 was the millennium, and I was thinking about my 18-year-old self, and that was the year before the millennium, and I spent a lot of my time as an 18-year-old being really worried that the world was about to melt down, that the millennium bug was gonna have some impact. And incredibly selfishly, you talk about how I was such an enlightened teenager. I was not. I was absolutely concerned that the night I went out for the millennium was going to be the last night out, because the world was going to melt down. So, and I think it's a lesson, right? We spend a lot of time worrying about the things that don't actually happen. And I would go back to my 18-year-old self and say, just don't worry about the millennium.
Robbie Williams is going to come on and sing it. We're going to be all right.
That is not going to be the thing that you are concerned about. What, the 2nd of January, when we were all like breathed a sigh of relief and said, no, okay, that was nonsense. So yeah, sorry, it's not more profound, but it really would be that.
Brilliant. First time that I've heard of that. Very good. Who has been the biggest inspiration throughout your life, and why?
I will always be eternally grateful for my parents for instilling a real sense of hard work in me and my brother. Me and my brother both have a work ethic which entirely comes from my parents. I saw them growing up being incredibly hardworking and teaching us and showing us that hard work was necessary, and not to be afraid of it and not to shirk it and just to go for it. And, you know, I was one of the first years that you had to pay for university, and I told my parents that they basically pay you to go to university and you get loads of grants, and that turned out to be completely wrong. I was the year you had to pay. So again, working, you know, I spent my whole of my university time working. I worked in factories, and I was a waiter, and I did all sorts of jobs. I was dinner lady in a private school. I did so many different jobs, but that felt entirely normal to me because I'd seen my parents work. I mean, we'd now call it hustle, but they just worked all the time. So that I'm internally grateful, I think. And similarly, actually, I think to some of the other guests you've had on over the last 24 hours, I don't have one person. I have lots of people that I've come into contact over my career who I think, oh, what would they do in that situation? And I'm constantly inspired by people around me. You know, at the moment, Carleen Jackson's doing amazing stuff talking about dyslexia. I'm dyslexic, talking about dyslexia and flexible working. And Emma Cleary's doing the same with flexible working. Steph Pryor's doing amazing stuff with inclusion and diversity. I spend a lot of time just thinking, yes, I'm going to be, you know, when I grow up, I'm going to be more like these people that are around me. So yeah, I kind of pick and choose every day of like, who's going to be my person that I'm going to model a bit more in my life.
Love that. Could you recommend a book or a podcast for our listeners that has had an impact on you?
Yeah, so this was an easy one, actually. So I'm an introvert, and I grew up, or my career kind of started in what it felt like at the time in a world that idolized extroverts. And I thought, I'm not like that. I'm not somebody who naturally puts myself forward or wants to speak out in meetings unless I've got something really important to say. I tend to listen, and I thought, I'm never going to be, you know, the people that I look up to, who my line managers and the CEOs of the charities that I was working for when I was more junior. I thought, I'm never going to be them. I'm never going to be that person. And the book was Susan Cain, Quiet, and it's about the power of extroverts. And I read that book, I think it's 2012 book. I read that book and just felt like this sigh of relief that, one, it was okay to be an extrovert, and that actually there were things about being an extrovert that I could lean into and I could still be a manager or a leader, or, you know, the things that I wanted to do, the ability to have the power to change stuff wasn't going to be hampered by my ability to generally hide in the corner and be a bit more quiet and listen rather than speak and do all of that stuff. So I thoroughly recommend it. If you're an introvert or you're feeling like you might be shy or that, read that book, because it was vindication really for me.
Awesome. Final question.
Okay.
Finally, what is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
I think it's got to be do something that's bigger than you. And I'm incredibly lucky to do a job that if I won the lottery, I have to play the lottery first, but if I won the lottery, I would still do this job. I would do it if I didn't get paid. And all the times that it feels hard or difficult or scary, I think I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for the person who doesn't have a platform to speak, or the child in hospital that needs this service, or the family that are going through the worst experience in their life. And that's the thing that gets me up. It, you know, when you walk on stage in front of 1,000 people and the fear is there, I walk on stage thinking, this isn't about you, this is about the people you represent. So I think that's what keeps me happy, is there's a bigger job to be done, and I've got a little part to play, and I'll play my part until the big job gets done.
What an absolutely brilliant way to finish. What an amazing answer. And you are doing amazing work and genuinely saving people's lives. And this is incredible. So from the bottom of my heart, obviously, thank you for all you do with Rockinghorse and everything that Rockinghorse stands for and what it's about. And you saved my son's life. So that's why we're here raising money. And it's been a magical experience doing this whole thing. And thank you for being my final guest.
Thank you, Sam.
And as they say, for the final time, is a wrap.
Woo! You made it.
We've done it. I believe every business owner has a story to tell. Through seeking true, authentic insights about the entrepreneurial journey, I provide a platform for our peers to share their stories and inspire those that listen. This is the County Business Talks podcast, powered by Picture Book Films.